Hi there, I'm Andrew, you're watching ThatGamerAjax, and welcome to this week's episode of the Veil of the Void class basics, and today we are going to be talking about the Thaumatech. Now, of all the classes that are available in Veil of the Void, the Thaumatech is one of the only ones that is primarily dedicated to focusing on the arcane arts. It would be the equivalent of playing a wizard in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, though this one does have a little bit more complicated mechanics, which might make it a little bit more intimidating for new players. That being said, it has a whole lot of potential in what it can do both on the battlefield and in any kind of roleplay or exploration scenario that you could think of. So let's go ahead and dive right on in to some of the strengths of this class. So first and foremost, the Thaumatech is a class that has a whole lot of elemental variety. You focus on having these crafted USBs that allow you to kind of change from the different elements between your fire, earth, air, and water, and each of them gives you kind of unique effects. So along with the spells that you're going to get by switching these USBs, each one also has a different effect. You know, you can even call in a solar flare to, smack an enemy almost like a whip, or you can summon a kind of healing mist for your allies, depending on what kind of USB that you're using. The spells in this game also have some absolutely devastating effects. While you start off only knowing a handful, once you get access to these elemental USBs that we talked about at level 2, you're able to have access to all the spells from that particular one. Now, it does take your entire movement if you're going to be swapping out these USBs, so if you're changing from like fire to water as a quick example to have access to that full tree. So make sure that your positioning is incredibly careful while you are playing this class. Spells have a bunch of devastating effects, and the more points that you have in your arcane skill, which is what you're going to be using when you're casting these spells, much like a wizard would use its intelligence modifier in Dungeons & Dragons, the easier it is going to be to pull off. Unfortunately, Veil of the Void does have an issue where if you critically fail on a spell, it goes out of control and you have to kind of wrangle it back in. So make sure that you are trying to roll as high as possible when using this class. The higher level that your Thaumatech is, you also are able to start using your casting in much more different ways that are kind of helpful to the rest of the party. You can start kind of charging items with spells, and you can give it to an ally that they might not even have access to magic, and they can cast that spell as if you were the one that was doing it. This also makes it so you can avoid going into the charge state, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about some of the complications for this class. The Thaumatech also has a lot of very interesting ways to build this class outside of having your mentality, or it would be the equivalent of your intelligence score in Dungeons & Dragons being the highest trait that you have. You can kind of build this however you want. If you want to be able to take a little bit more of a beating, if you think that you might be in the thick of things, I would personally recommend taking more points in vitality when you create this kind of class. Or if you want to be more of a smooth talker, I would recommend going into charm. The last thing I would also recommend, maybe investing some points in would be finesse if you're planning on using any of the weapons outside of the wands or staffs that you get while you are playing this game. Now, let's talk about specializations for the Thaumatech. In Veil of the Void, when you hit level 5, you get to specialize your character, which would be kind of the equivalent of, playing an archetype for more of your martial classes in Dungeons & Dragons. So with the specializations of the Thaumatech, you have the Elemental Duelist, which focuses on, instead of using only one of those elemental USBs that we spoke about earlier at a time, you're able to actually combine two to get kind of more interesting effects that you can do on a battlefield. These usually have devastating two-part effects, but it will make it so that way the USBs are on a cooldown on a much more frequent rate. So make sure you keep that in mind if this is the specialization that you choose. Up next is the Runesmith, which focuses on kind of crafting out runes and allows you to become more of a space cowboy. You are able to etch runes onto bullets, and it makes it so you are charging these bullets with spells, which won't go against the charge state that we mentioned earlier. Along with this, you're able to start kind of enchanting weapons and armor for your allies. And lastly, you have the Shade Caller, which is more of, think like an arcane trickster from Dungeons & Dragons. You focus more on stealthy gameplay, and while you're in the shadows, you get access to a couple of new traits, as well as some new spells that you're able to pull off while you are in that zone. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some of the weaknesses of the Thaumatech. Personally, I think that this is a class that is not very well suited for brand new players to tabletop games. It does have a lot that is going on. There's a lot that you need to know with it, and there's a lot that you have to keep track of between the spells, your trait cooldowns, and the spell cooldowns, as long as the charge state. Now, the charge state is something that happens in Veil of the Void whenever you cast a spell. It means that you're kind of drawing on a different realm's power, and it makes it so that way the more you do it, the harder it gets to maintain that spell. Once your charge state hits 6, so once you've cast 6 spells, you are becoming overcharged. It's a lot more taxing on your character to start pulling on that realm for power. It makes it so it's a little bit harder for you to cast the spell, which means that the difficulty of your arcane check when you are playing this class is going to be increased, and the cooldowns of the spells is going to be longer. If for some reason you get up to a charge state of 12s, any spells that you're trying to cast from that realm are automatic critical failures, meaning that they have devastating effects for yourself and your party. So keep that in mind. You will not be able to control spells once you get to that certain point. The charge state can be reduced by either taking a short or a long rest, and the Thaumatech does have some built-in things that will make it so you can either get some free spells that don't add to the charge state, or you're able to automatically cool down your charge state by a certain amount once you hit certain levels while playing this class. And as we mentioned earlier, this is a class that just has a whole lot of things that you have to track, so make sure that you are very good at keeping notes and that you are able to keep an eye out on how long your spells and your different traits are going to be lasting. This is a game that does have a lot of cooldowns with it, and the Thaumatech has some of the absolute most in the game. So all in all, I feel like the Thaumatech is a very powerful magical class. If you enjoy playing casters in games like Dungeons and Dragons, and if you like playing wizards or clerics, this might be a class that might be up your alley. This is not a class that I would recommend to new players because there's so much going on beneath the hood, and it really takes a while to learn this class. So this is going to be the end of the Veil class basics for the time being. We've covered all of the main classes, though we will be revisiting this in the near future, as we've just gotten a couple of new classes that came out with the Reforged edition. So tell me, what are your thoughts on Thaumatech? Is this something that, if you're a new player, would you even be interested in looking into something like a magic system? So comment below, let me know, and please don't forget to subscribe. It really helps out my small YouTube channel, and I really appreciate the support. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.